Hello, my name is Christine Gilfillan. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at SAFE Berks, which is formerly Berks Women in Crisis, and our program is called The Place You Start. Last month, or the last program that we put out, we talked about the fact that Berks Women in Crisis made the decision in December of 2016 to change its name to SAFE Berks. So this is actually our first program as SAFE Berks, so I want to welcome you back if you've been listening. And today's program is with Steve Ohnsman, Pastor Steve Ohnsman, Reverend Dr. Steve Ohnsman, right?
Steve's good.
Steve, who has been a board member of SAFE Berks since 2015, but has been involved with the organization much longer than that in a number of ways, specifically around outreach to men and boys to end domestic violence and sexual assault, and also in some of our outreach efforts with various faith communities in order to engage them to address the issues of domestic violence and sexual assault. So usually the first question, first of all, welcome. Thank you for coming on the program.
Glad to be here.
And usually the first question I ask is, can you think back to when you first became involved with SAFE Berks, which at the time was Berks Women in Crisis, and sort of how did that come about?
Well, this is my 18th year at Calvary, and one of our very active members, Louise Grimm, was one of the founding moms, the mothers of when it was BWIC, or actually something else, I guess, before BWIC. Mm-hmm. And so she was telling me about it and said you needed to have one of the rooms fixed up, a bedroom or something. So we bought some sheets and towels and brought it down there, and so I was asked to bring it down. Well, I was told where the door was, the mystery door, and had to go through an awful lot to be able to get in because it was a safe house, and obviously I'm a guy, so I wasn't obviously safe, and so from there we kept sort of just providing whatever was needed for the women who were living there, or any kind of we brought staff into the church to do programs and into some of our larger meetings, association meetings or groupings of churches. And over that time since then, about 17 years, we've just sort of gotten more and more involved. We donate to SAFE Berks, and then I was asked to be on the board, and that's great. But I was involved a lot with Walk a Mile in her shoes when we actually walked in high heels. Big mistake. Damaged my legs.
That's why we don't do it anymore.
It's terrible. But it was also very eye-opening for us, and reaffirmed for me that nobody should ever wear high heels. It's just awful. So
I agree.
Yeah, so we've just our church has sort of been connected and try to get other churches connected too. I'm not sure what the problem is, but oftentimes religious institutions are often the last ones to get involved with programs that try to talk about equality and talk about safety. And I'll just speak for churches. A lot of churches have these ideas that men are in charge, women are not, and our church doesn't do that. But so I've tried to advocate for that from that perspective to get folks connected, and some have. Mm-hmm. So that's how I first got connected.
Right. So what you were just referring to were some of the obstacles that we're dealing with when we're working with survivors of domestic violence.
Right.
Their faith community is either their anchor, or the place that really helps to save them or help them move on to autonomy, or sometimes the faith community can put up some barriers or roadblocks to their receiving services. What do you think the role of the faith community, of all of our faith communities, might be in an ideal world?
I think we come to the perspective that men and women are equal, and so nobody has the right to control, force, manipulate any other person. I mean, there's always lots of things in relationships that are strange, and we can't know what's in each person's relationship, but the faith community should be a place that holds that up and says that no one person is more important or powerful than another person. And then in the midst of discord, we should be there to help them and help them understand. I can't tell you how many times I had a woman say to me that her pastor, her priest, or sometimes a rabbi would say to her, well, just go make a nice meal and he'll be fine. That's not how it works. And so the faith community has to be a place that teaches that from the very beginning, that boys and girls, men and women, all people are equal in the eyes of God, and then and that they have equal gifts and equal abilities and equal say in the relationship. I think that's where it begins.
Right, and that violence is not an acceptable.
Right, that's right. That just doesn't
component to
relationship. And you know, one of the difficulties is that, and knowing this as a man myself, we're raised in a certain way in this culture, and where the emotions we're taught to be angry. We're not taught to be loving or compassionate. I think that's changing, but I know in my own self that I struggle with a lot of those things where you want to be, let's just do this, or tell people, order things around, and that doesn't work. That's not harmony. But we've seen that many of us are raised that way, and so we have to sort of deprogram ourselves to not have roles.
To not default to those emotions.
Right, and not say, well, you do this because you're the man, you do this, you're the woman. There are certain ways you have to act, and that doesn't work anymore. And I'm glad that doesn't work anymore. But still, it's a struggle to deprogram, to change the way we do things.
I think that's a great segue to the fact that not only have you been involved with us as part of the faith community, but we've done quite a bit of outreach to men and boys types of initiatives over the years. In addition to the Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, some education at what used to be called Camp Peaceworks and will now be called Camp SAFE Berks.
Okay.
So that's another name that's changing. But what do you think the impact has been on you personally in terms of getting more involved in looking at those gender role norms? How's it impacted your the way you see it personally?
Well, when I was a kid, I never had any idea that I would. I was a stay-at-home dad for 6 years. I mean, I never had any idea that that's what I would do. For me, that's what my mom actually didn't stay home either. Both my parents worked, but that was always what you were taught, that if one person stays home, it's the mom. That changed completely for me, and to try to claim some of that nurturing part has been something I've tried to do, but boy, it's hard. I mean, it's when you never were raised you didn't play with dolls, you didn't, you were supposed to go out there and do stuff and not stay and care for things. That has really, I've seen a different way of doing things, and I'm glad that a lot of younger guys are not being raised the way I was. They're being raised that they can be a father in a different way than I think I was parented as a kid. So and this past year I was able to be at Camp Peaceworks and be a part of the camp, and that was really neat to watch how that worked and how the kids were taught about different ways in which oppression seeps into their lives, and how you sort of fight back against that in a non-violent way, of course, but learn to see the things that are wrong in the culture and not become part of it. And that's been very helpful to me.
Right. And I would just remind the audience at this point that one of the main reasons that we changed our name was to be more inclusive of everyone that this violence happens to. Also to send the message out to men and boys and people who maybe typically hadn't been involved in our work in the past, that we welcome them to be part of the work that we're doing. So we have more men on the board, for example, now than we ever have. And we're doing more education programs and trying to bring, as we can, trying to bring more men and more people inside to be volunteers and be involved with the organization.
Right. I think having Matt Bailey on the staff doing the work that he does is really a good symbol as well. It's just like they've always said, a lot of times girls didn't have women as role models in certain roles. In the same way, it's really good for guys to see a man working at an organization that's seen as mostly for women. But boys are victimized as much as girls are with violence. And,
almost, yeah.
Yeah, and so of course men are overwhelmingly the oppressors in that situation, but boys learn that, and so the teaching that goes on here, the education that goes on in the schools, I wish more of them would embrace it and welcome SAFE Berks in to do some of the programs they do. I think it helps change people's lives, and that's why I said yes to be on the board. I think it's a great organization that way.
Well, we really appreciate that. So what do you think the most exciting thing is that's coming up with all the whole big year that we just had, with all of the things that are changing? What's the most exciting thing to you about being on the board?
I think just the name change symbolically, talking about how the role of SAFE Berks is bigger than how it's been before. When it's hard to change a name. I can imagine my church trying to change its name and how people would respond to that, after 40 years. But I think when I showed the name to some people who were objective about it, not people who have been, the founders or the people who work there, they looked at that name and they said, that's it. That defines what you do. It's a safe place, and for everybody. And I think that is sort of the beginning of sort of a new era for the organization. And boy, we need it more than ever. So I think that's very, very exciting. And the facility, of course, when it was built, the new facility is a couple of years old now, I guess, what, 4 years old?
Almost 5.
Almost 5. Is a wonderful, and nobody's hiding anymore. It's there. It's a safe place that people can go but still, everybody knows it's there. It's prominent, and it's not a hidden subject anymore. I think that's very positive too. So I think all around the whole thing is sort of spreading its wings and embracing more people and more issues. That's what I think.
That's great. Well, I just want to thank you very much for being on the board,
My pleasure.
for all the things that you've been involved with, and
pleasure.
for being on the program
Thanks.
today. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. This is The Place You Start. Visit us at safeberks.org or by calling 610-373-1206.